The boot hit the chain-link fence before the rest of him even caught up. Ethan Cole was running not from anything, just running the way a man runs when his body needs to move faster than his thoughts. He cut through the cracked sidewalk of Graymill Avenue, past the boarded-up laundromat, past the Chinese takeout with the flickering neon sign, past the old guys who sat on milk crates outside the barber shop every night like they'd been placed there and forgotten. It was past 10. The streetlights cast everything in that flat, yellow light that made the whole neighborhood look like a photograph taken too long ago. Ethan slowed at the corner of 9th and Harlan, hands on his knees, chest heaving, staring at nothing. Nothing in this case was a 6-acre lot behind a rusted fence. Weeds pushed through cracked asphalt. Mountains of car carcasses, Chevys, Fords, old vans with their doors hanging off sat piled against each other in the dark like sleeping animals. There was a stench to it, oil and rust and rain-soaked fabric. A handmade sign wired to the fence read, Cole's Junkyard, ESD, 1978. Someone had spray-painted over the bottom, condemned. Ethan stared at it. He didn't know why his feet always stopped here. A few feet away, 3 older men were talking, Mr. Delson, who owned the pawn shop, and 2 others Ethan vaguely recognized from the block. Their voices carried. "City's gonna flatten it," Delson was saying. "Good riddance, been an eyesore for 20 years, rats the size of cats in there." "Somebody ought to buy it just to burn it," the second man said, and they all laughed, low and certain, the laughter of men who have stopped imagining things could be different. Ethan said nothing. He gripped the chain link. That's when he heard the other voice, crisp, unhurried, the kind of voice that's used to rooms going quiet when it speaks. Interesting reaction. Ethan turned. A man stood perhaps 10 feet away just outside the glow of the streetlight. He wore a suit that cost more than anything on this block, dark navy, no tie, collar open, just one button. He was maybe 50, silver-haired with sharp eyes that missed nothing. In one hand he held a phone, but he wasn't looking at it. He was looking at Ethan. "You're not laughing," the man said. Ethan straightened. "Don't find it funny." The man stepped closer, extending his hand. "Adrian Kingsley." Ethan shook it. The grip was brief, firm, measuring. "Ethan Cole." Something shifted in Kingsley's expression, just barely. "Cole like the sign." "My grandfather built this place," Ethan's jaw tightened, "before he died." Kingsley looked at the yard, then back at Ethan. The 3 men on the corner had gone quiet, watching. Kingsley seemed unbothered by the audience. "I've been acquiring properties in this corridor," Kingsley said. "This lot included. I was going to flatten it next spring, build mixed-use retail." He paused. "But you're looking at it like it's something." "It is something." Kingsley tilted his head, a faint smile not unkind. $700 and it's yours, as is everything in it, every rusted bolt, every broken engine, every problem you can't see yet." He let that land. "I'll draw up a paper transfer tonight. My team handles the city liens." Ethan stared at him. The number was so small it felt like an insult and enormous at the same time. $700. He had maybe 400 in his account. "Why?" Ethan asked. "Call it curiosity," Kingsley said. "I want to see what you do with it." He handed Ethan a card, turned and walked to a waiting car that Ethan hadn't noticed until now. The door closed. The car pulled away silently, no fanfare, the way powerful people always left, as though the world rearranged itself to let them through. Ethan stood in the yellow light, holding the card, staring at the condemned sign on his grandfather's fence. He was there the next morning at 7. Daylight did the junkyard no favors. What the darkness had given drama, the sun gave honest cruelty. The place was a disaster. Compressed columns of rusted cars formed corridors that wound into dead ends. The main structure, a corrugated metal workshop, had a roof that sagged in the middle like a tired old back. Glass everywhere, puddles of something dark and iridescent, rats as advertised, weeds chest-high in some places. A broken hydraulic lift, frozen at an angle, jutted from the ground like a monument to a bad day. Ethan walked through it for 2 hours, not speaking, just looking. He kept a notepad. He wrote things down. Copper wire visible in 3 locations. Functional axles at least a dozen. Engine blocks maybe 40. Aluminum body panels salvageable. Cast iron components. Steel framing still structurally sound on the main workshop. He wrote slowly, methodically, because if he thought too fast he'd have to reckon with the size of the problem. He transferred the remaining money in his savings. He borrowed $300 from his cousin Marcus without explaining why. He found another $400 he'd saved from side work, hauling furniture, fixing phones, whatever came his way. He signed Kingsley's paper the following afternoon. The clerk at the city office looked at the lot address and back at Ethan like he was signing his own death certificate. He didn't tell anyone at first, then the neighbors found out anyway. "You bought the junkyard?" His neighbor Rita nearly dropped her grocery bag. "Ethan, baby, that place is cursed." "It's not cursed. 3 businesses tried to open there since your granddad passed. 3, you know what happened to all of them." "They didn't have a plan," Ethan said. "They didn't have sense," she corrected, "and neither do you apparently." He smiled and kept moving. Delson caught him unlocking the front gate on the second morning. "Son," he said not unkindly, "I've watched this neighborhood for 30 years. You're a smart kid, don't waste yourself on a heap." "Mr. Delson," Ethan said, "do you know what copper wire is worth per pound right now?" Delson blinked. "4.25, Ethan said, "and I've got maybe 200 pounds of it in there." He swung the gate open. "Have a good morning." He didn't feel as confident as he sounded. At night, alone in the workshop with a single work light running off a borrowed generator, the doubt moved in like cold air under a door. He'd sit on a crate, looking at his notepad, running the numbers: the cost of a used plasma cutter, the price of gloves and boots and basic tools, the monthly electricity once he could connect to the grid, the potential revenue from recycled metal, and the gap between what he had and what he needed widened every time he looked at it. He thought about his grandfather, Old Man Cole, who'd built this place from a single tow truck and 20 years of hard, unglamorous work, who'd taught Ethan at age 9 how to tell the difference between steel and aluminum just by tapping it, who'd said, on one of the last days Ethan visited him in the hospital, "Boy, nothing in this world is junk unless you decide it is." Ethan exhaled, he picked up a socket wrench and got back to work. The first real disaster came on day 11. He'd borrowed a cutting torch from a friend and was working on separating a stack of car bodies when the lower car's frame gave out. The stack shifted, and the upper vehicle came down fast. Ethan threw himself sideways and hit the gravel hard, scraping both palms and banging his knee badly enough to limp for 4 days. The cutting torch skidded under a pile of debris. He lay on his back in the gravel for a long moment, staring at the gray sky, pain throbbing up his leg. He laughed because if he didn't, he'd do something else. He got up, retrieved the torch, and kept going. By week 3, the laughter from the corner had grown. 2 teenagers on bikes started riding past the gate every morning, calling in, "Junkman, hey Junkman!" He ignored them. A woman who lived in the apartment building that backed the lot's east fence leaned out her window one afternoon and yelled, "Can you keep the noise down? My baby's sleeping." "I'll wrap it up by 6, he called back. "Wrap it up now." "I'll wrap it up by 6. She slammed the window. He kept cutting. And then on day 26, the find. He'd been clearing a collapsed section of shelving in the back of the workshop when he uncovered it. A complete LS engine block buried under tarp and debris and what looked like 20 years of dust. He crouched down, ran his hand along it. Cast iron solid, the mounting points intact. He checked the block number, he photographed it. He posted it in a forum he'd been lurking on for weeks. The response came in 4 hours. "That's an LS1 from a 2001 Camaro. Clean, where'd you find it? I'll pay $1,000 cash." Ethan read the message 3 times. He called the buyer. The man drove 2 hours from across the state, inspected the engine, and handed Ethan an envelope with $100 bills in it. They shook hands in the middle of the junkyard, surrounded by rust and rubble, and Ethan felt something shift inside him, not relief exactly, but alignment, like a gear catching. He didn't spend the money, he reinvested all of it. He bought a used angle grinder, a proper set of safety gear, heavy-duty cutting blades, and 3 50-gallon drums for separating metals by type. He set up a basic sorting station near the gate. He started going through the yard systematically, steel here, aluminum here, copper there, cast iron separate. He researched recycling prices daily. He learned which yards in the region paid the highest rates for which materials. He started making runs. The recycler on Industrial Boulevard had seen everything. But even he raised an eyebrow when Ethan showed up for the 3rd time in 2 weeks, truck bed loaded. "You running a yard?" the man asked. "Working on it," Ethan said. "Which yard?" "Graymill, corner of 9th and Harlan." The recycler squinted. "That condemned place." "Not anymore." He wasn't wrong, though it still looked condemned if you didn't know what to look for. But Ethan knew what to look for now. He saw it every time he walked the gate. The recycler, whose name turned out to be Benson, started giving Ethan better rates without being asked. When Ethan asked him why, Benson shrugged. People who know what they have are worth investing in. People who don't know what they have, I can't help them anyway. He tapped the counter. You're the first kind. He wasn't wrong, though it still looked condemned if you didn't know what to look for. But things were changing. Aisles were forming where there had been chaos. The main workshop had been cleaned, its floor swept, the broken window patched with plywood and plastic sheeting. Ethan had rigged a basic electrical connection. There was light now, real light, and with light came a different energy in the place. And then came Maya. She was 17, tall, all elbows, with locks pulled back and headphones always around her neck. She showed up at the gate one morning and said, "I heard you're doing something in here." Ethan looked at her. "Who told you that?" "The guy at the bike shop." She peered past him into the yard. "I can weld, my uncle taught me." "You got proof? Give me a torch." He did. She welded a clean bead on a piece of scrap steel in under 2 minutes. Ethan stared at it. "You know what I'm paying." "Whatever it is, I'll negotiate up in a month," she said. He hired her. 2 weeks later came Jordan, 22, who'd been laid off from a manufacturing plant and had experience with mechanical assembly. Then Quame, 18, who had no skills but showed up every day before 7 and did exactly what he was told, and sometimes did what he wasn't told when he could see it needed doing. Ethan watched him for 3 days and then gave him keys to the gate. The yard came alive with people. And with people came a new kind of problem, not failure but the complexity of success. Ethan found himself making decisions he hadn't anticipated. Who gets which tasks, how to maintain quality when they're moving fast, how to say no to bad buyers without losing good ones, how to keep morale up when a deal fell through or the weather turned bad and the yard flooded ankle deep and everyone stood looking at the water with the same expression. "I need all of you," Ethan told them that day, standing in 6 inches of muddy water, boots soaked, "but only the ones who want to be here." No one left. He started saying yes to repair requests, people bringing in their old machines, cars, equipment, asking if he could fix or part them out. He set up a small intake area near the workshop. The first week, 3 requests, the second, 7. By the end of the month, they had a wait list. He built a display outside the front gate, old car parts cleaned and painted, arranged as sculpture. A hubcap became a wall clock face. A gear shift column became a lamp stand. A pair of exhaust pipes curved and welded together formed a vase that a woman stopped on her walk home and asked to buy. He sold it for $60. He made 3 more. Delson came by on a Tuesday afternoon and stood at the gate for a while before Ethan noticed him. When Ethan walked over, the old man looked around the yard, the sorting stations, the workshop windows lit from inside, Maya visible through the open door running a bead on something, and said nothing for a long moment. "Not bad," Delson said finally. "Come back in 90 days, Ethan said. A local furniture maker, a stocky woman named Priya who ran a small studio 3 blocks away, stopped by because she'd seen the display. She needed metal brackets for a custom dining table. Could Ethan fabricate them? He said yes before he was entirely sure he could, then figured it out. Priya came back a week later, inspected the brackets, and said, "These are better than what I was getting from my supplier. How many can you make a month?" That was the conversation that changed the scope. Because Priya told 2 people. Those 2 people told others. By the time spring arrived, Ethan was receiving commercial inquiries, not just individuals but small manufacturers, contractors, designers looking for custom fabricated pieces, recycled materials, structural components. He stayed up until 2 in the morning 3 nights that week, sitting at the plywood desk he'd set up in the corner of the workshop, going through numbers. Revenue up. Expenses up too. He needed more equipment. He needed a better truck. He needed a proper electrical setup rather than the rigged connection that worked but worried him. He needed more money than he had. He sat with that problem the way you sit with a toothache, trying to ignore it while knowing it wouldn't let you. Then Kingsley came back. It was a Thursday afternoon and Ethan was in the yard overseeing a disassembly job when he looked up and saw him standing at the gate, same composed stance, same sharp suit. Ethan set down the wrench and walked over. They looked at each other through the chain link. "You actually did it," Kingsley said. There was something in his voice that wasn't quite surprise but was close to it, the tone of a man whose models don't often fail him, encountering one that did. "Come in," Ethan said and opened the gate. He gave him the tour, the same walk he'd done alone on that first morning, but now the yard was a different place. Kingsley moved through it, observing everything, the sorting stations, the display area, the workshop, Maya welding inside, Jordan and Quame running parts to the truck. He didn't speak until they'd made the full circuit and were standing again by the gate. What do you need? Kingsley asked. Right now, a $40,000 equipment upgrade and a better power line. I can do that? He said it the way a man says the weather's nice, just a fact. In exchange for 15% equity, I don't touch operations, my name on nothing public, you run this. Ethan was quiet for a moment. He looked at the yard. He looked at Maya through the workshop window. He looked at the makeshift display by the fence and the line item in his notebook that showed 6 weeks of sustained revenue growth. He thought about what it had cost him to build this, not money, though the money had been real enough. He thought about the mornings before anyone else arrived, when he'd walk the yard alone in the half-dark, wondering if this was going to be the thing that broke him. He thought about the gravel in his palms and the limp that had lasted 4 days and the way the doubt moved in every night like a tide, and the way he'd learned to let it come and still get up in the morning. I need you to understand something, Ethan said, his voice steady. I didn't stand outside this fence that night and think about money. I thought about what my grandfather built here. I thought about why it mattered, and I bought this yard because I believed in something nobody else could see yet. He met Kingsley's eyes. That's not for sale. I'm not trying to buy it, Kingsley said. I never could. I'm trying to fund it. There was a difference. Ethan heard it. I didn't need your help to see what this could be, Ethan said. You should know that. I do know that, Kingsley said. That's why I'm offering instead of just buying. 10%, Ethan said, and you're a silent partner, nothing changes on my end. Kingsley was quiet for 2 seconds, then he extended his hand, 10%. They shook, the same handshake as before, firm, brief, measuring, but different now. This time they were measuring each other as equals. What happened 3 weeks later wasn't in anyone's plan. The storm came in overnight without much warning. By 3 in the morning, the wind was tearing at the workshop roof, and by 4, Ethan's phone was ringing. Maya, who lived closest, saying the corrugated panels on the east side of the roof were lifting. He was out of his apartment and running before she finished the sentence. The yard at 4:30 in a storm was something else entirely. Rain in horizontal sheets. The streetlights on Harlan dead, so the only light came from the shop's interior in strobing flashes as the power connection flickered. 3 of the exterior storage panels, metal shelving units holding sorted catalog parts that represented weeks of work and thousands of dollars in inventory, had gone over. Parts everywhere mixing with muddy runoff, some sliding toward the drain, irretrievable. Maya was already there. Jordan pulled up 3 minutes after Ethan. Quame showed up without being called in a raincoat and mud boots and looked at the chaos and said simply, "What do you need first?" The roof was the emergency. Ethan climbed it in the rain, Maya screaming at him to let her do it, him screaming back that he needed her on the ground, and lay across the lifted panels, body weight against the wind, while Jordan passed up straps and bolts from below. They secured 4 panels. The 5th tore loose before they could reach it and sailed into the dark, but 4 was enough. Then they worked the inventory, on hands and knees in the mud, retrieving parts, calling them out, LS bracket southeast shelf, matching them to the catalog on Ethan's phone that Jordan held under his raincoat to keep it dry. They lost maybe $200 in parts, the rest they saved. By 6 in the morning, the rain had broken. The 4 of them sat on overturned crates inside the workshop, filthy, exhausted, not speaking. The shop light buzzed overhead. Somewhere outside, a bird started up. Maya looked at her hands, caked in mud, and then at Ethan. You know, when I walked in here the first time, I thought you were kind of insane. What do you think now? She picked up a bolt from the floor and turned it in her fingers. I think you're definitely insane, but it's starting to make sense. Jordan laughed, Quame laughed, and then Ethan laughed, and it was different from the laugh he'd done lying in the gravel in week 1, lighter, fuller, the laugh of a man who's got people around him. He sat there a while longer, letting the silence be what it was, not defeat, not victory, just the particular quiet of people who have been through something together and don't need to name it. He thought about a conversation he'd had with his mother, 2 weeks before he bought the yard, when she'd found out he was even considering it. She'd gone quiet for a long moment on the phone and then said, "Your grandfather built that place in a time when nobody was handing him anything. He built it the same way you would, slow and hard and one day at a time. And then life moved on and nobody was there to keep it going. That broke his heart more than anything." She'd paused, "Don't let it break yours." He hadn't understood what she meant then. He thought she was warning him away from it. Now he knew she was telling him to go in. He called Priya that morning. She had 3 orders waiting. He called 2 other clients. He told them delivery was on schedule. He had just enough parts to make that true, barely, by working through the weekend. They made the deliveries on time. The yard that existed now was not the yard Ethan had walked through on that first morning. The mountains of undifferentiated wreckage were gone. In their place were organized sections, each with a label, a catalog, a measured inventory. The workshop ran real power, real equipment, the new angle grinders, and a second-hand welding station that was a significant step up from what they'd been using. The display at the gate had grown into something closer to a proper storefront, cleaned parts, fabricated pieces, a handwritten price list. Cars pulled over regularly. Ethan had started a board on the wall of the workshop. Post-its and index cards with orders, materials, timelines, names. It covered an 8-foot section from floor to ceiling. Some mornings he stood in front of it for 5 minutes just tracking it all, moving things, updating. Maya started bringing in a younger sister, 15, who swept and cataloged. Quaim asked if his cousin could come learn welding on weekends. Ethan said yes. He built out a basic training area, a welding station with scrap steel, and a set of safety guidelines Maya had written out by hand in a script so precise it looked printed. One afternoon, Ethan found himself sitting on the same crate he'd sat on that very first night, the one beneath the work light, but now the light was different, the space was different, and he was different. He held his notebook, the same one from day one, now almost full. He turned to the first page and read his initial assessment: copper wire, maybe 200 pounds, functional axles, engine blocks, approximately 40. He turned to the current page. The numbers were different by an order of magnitude. He sat for a while, long enough for the light outside to change. Then he heard the gate and got back to work. Kingsley came by again on a Friday in early summer, this time unannounced. Ethan was in the yard reviewing a delivery with a contractor who'd become a regular buyer. When the contractor left, Ethan turned and found Kingsley standing near the display, looking at a lamp made from a vintage gear assembly. "How much is this?" Kingsley asked. "$250. Kingsley reached into his pocket. Ethan waved him off. "It's yours." Kingsley looked at him. "I don't do charity." "Neither do I," Ethan said. "It's a gift. First thing I've been able to give somebody in a long time." He paused. "That means something to me." Kingsley held the lamp for a moment, considering it. Then he said quietly, "I've bought 47 properties in this corridor over 20 years. I have never once stood inside one and thought, this is something more than an asset." He looked around the yard. "I underestimated you. You didn't just buy a junkyard." He held up the lamp. "You built something." Ethan looked at the yard. At the board inside the workshop window covered in cards and plans. At Quaim walking a teenager through how to read a parts catalog. At Maya visible through the open workshop door, welding with the precise, clean focus of someone who's found the thing they're meant to do. At the gate, where a woman had just pulled over, gotten out of her car, and was looking at the display with the expression of someone who's seen exactly what they needed. He thought about the night he'd stood outside this fence in the dark, listening to men laugh at something they couldn't see the value in. He thought about his grandfather's voice: "Nothing in this world is junk unless you decide it is." "Sometimes," Ethan said, "the junk that everybody else walks past is just opportunity waiting for the right person to stop." The woman at the gate called out, "Excuse me, is that clock for sale?" "Yes, ma'am," Ethan called back. "Let me show you." He walked toward her, and behind him the yard hummed, cutters and welders and the low conversation of people working, the particular sound of a place that had decided what it wanted to be and become it. It wasn't finished. There were more plans on the board, more parts to recover, more orders to fill, more young hands to teach. The workshop needed a better roof. The east wall needed reinforcing. He wanted to expand the training program into something formal, something that could be pointed to and named. But today, a woman was at the gate because something here had caught her eye. Today, his team was inside building. Today, the sign that said condemned was gone. He'd taken it down himself. The third morning, before anyone arrived, stood on a crate and unwired it from the chain link with his bare hands and dropped it in the scrap pile where it belonged. The junkyard hummed. Ethan Cole smiled and went to work. If this story moved you, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear that their junk might just be their empire. Subscribe for more stories that remind you what's possible, and drop in the comments, what's one thing in your life that others overlooked that you knew had value? We read every one.